this en banc meeting. Before we begin, I would like to ask everyone to please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you again. We are looking forward to hosting the second en banc of the year. There will be 4 in total, so welcome to Sedgwick County Commissioners. I am joined by Vice Mayor J.V. Johnston, Councilmember Brandon Johnson, Councilmember Becky Tuttle, Councilmember Mike Hoheisel, Councilmember Dalton Glasscock, and Councilmember Maggie Ballard. I will hand it over to Commissioner and Chairman Beatty.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Appreciate it, and want to welcome everybody to this en banc. A couple items on the agenda today, but also want to thank you, Madam Mayor, City Council. Thank you for the invitation. Bob and staff, thank you. Gracious host always for allowing us to come over and get through these 2 items today. A lot of work to be done, a lot of conversations, so why don't we just get right to it. For those that are watching in the public, we have a little different process that we do on the county side as an open public meeting. So the city and the county will go through a little bit different procedurally. So we'll work through those things, and then at the end, we'll come back together and try to make some decisions on a path forward. So with that being said, I'll officially call the meeting to order for Tuesday, April 29, 2025. Madam Clerk, first item, please.
Roll call. Commissioner Bluboff.
Present.
Commissioner Wise.
Present.
Commissioner Howell.
Present.
Commissioner Meitzner. Chairman Beatty.
Present. Next item, please.
New business, item A, Opioid Settlement Fund Strategic Plan.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Madam Mayor.
Well, good morning again, and our very first item is regarding the opioid settlement funds. As a reset for everyone, just as a reminder, nationally, there's $49.7 billion in this opioid settlement. The state of Kansas will receive approximately $190 million, and Wichita and Sedgwick County came together, and the estimated amount that combined we would get is $15.5 million. So now to talk about the strategic plan moving forward, we would like to invite Rusty Leeds with Sedgwick County.
Good morning. Thank you, Mayor, Chairman, Council, and Commission. This morning, we're going to follow up on the needs assessment and the strategic plan that were provided to us by the Stedman Group, whom the city and county jointly hired to work through this process, to reach out to the community and understand the needs in Sedgwick County, and then to put together a strategic plan on how these funds could be utilized best in our community to meet the needs, to fill the gaps that exist currently in the areas of prevention and treatment and recovery. And so after Stedman came in and presented their final report to both governing bodies, staff from both city and county got together, Dante Martin and I, along with counsel from both the city and the county, Tim Kaufman from the county side, who works with the human services groups. We've gotten together and we've talked through the work from Stedman and what next steps would be, so that's what we're going to present here this morning. If I can figure out how to move this forward. Okay. So we're in phase 1. The strategic plan was broken into 4 phases. We're in the first phase, which is the implementation of the process and infrastructure, and that was slated to occur through the first through the third quarter of 2025. And again, this is the follow-up to the strategic plan for utilization of the opioid settlement funds. Wrong direction. Okay. So in the beginning here, what we need to do first is stand up a governance structure or the foundation for this process. In the first phase includes selection of a governing structure, staffing and or development of an advisory board, meeting cadence and logistics, and to determine the evaluation process for the strategic plan. So those were the kind of the goals set forth in the first implementation phase. What we're recommending after reviewing the plan and the needs assessment and talking through this, what we're recommending is the city and county governance structure be an advisory council. It has tentatively been named for the purpose of conversation as the Wichita-Sedgwick County Addiction Intervention Coalition, and it will be structured in a fashion similar to that of the existing Liquor Tax Coalition. That seems to work well with the distribution of liquor tax funds, and we felt that if it was structured in a similar way, we would have the same types of success. The purpose of the Wichita-Sedgwick County Coalition is to evaluate and recommend effective allocation of the municipality's Fights Addiction Fund revenues or the settlement funds that were allocated to local governments because of the Kansas Fights Addiction Act. What we're recommending as far as the functions and responsibilities of the advisory board, which again we're referring to as a coalition to keep it clear that it's not the city council that we're talking about, not calling it a council, calling it a coalition. Their responsibility when they are stood up will be to advise and make recommendations to the city council and the county commission on the use of the funds that we receive from the opioid settlement, to assist with the preparation of RFPs, requests for proposals, seeking vendors who can fulfill those services that fill the gaps in our community. This group will also be responsible for reviewing and evaluating the responses from those entities that submit proposals to make sure that they meet the criteria that's set forth in the RFP. And then ultimately, they will bring recommendations to the council and the commission collectively on where they believe the dollars should be spent, whose proposals should be funded in order to provide those services. And then the last piece is that this group will be responsible, and we'll get to another piece of this shortly, but this group will be responsible for ensuring that the performance of those who receive the money is monitored and measured so that we know that those funds are being utilized in a way that best serve our community. The recommended composition of this advisory board or this coalition is that it will have no less than 11 members and no more than 15 members. These are voting members. Understanding that this group could call on expertise from other areas if they chose to bring them in to advise, but there would only be 11 to 15 voting members that would be appointed to this board. Members will be selected from across the substance abuse treatment and prevention community, including, not exclusively or limited to, but social service, parole, probation, medical, mental health, academics, courts, and law enforcement agencies. That aligns with the work that was done by the community that was involved with the Stedman needs assessment and the strategic plan construction, is that we want people who do this work day in and day out, who understand the work. We also want people who, at least some representation from lived experience, people who have lived experience with substance use disorders, with addiction, who have lived through that, come out on the other side, and can give that firsthand advice. So that would be the makeup. We're recommending that the city and county manager are designated as the two who identify coalition member nominees through an agreed upon process between the two of them, and then they will bring forward a list of recommended nominees to the governing bodies, each governing body, to ratify those nominees. So the governing bodies will have the final ratification of who's on that board, but we're suggesting that the managers compile the list of those who meet the criteria and bring those forward to you. Administration and procurement framework. This is the transparency and accountability portion of this. It's recommended that the city and county legal departments work together to finalize a joint resolution and bylaw draft for this advisory board or coalition. Currently, they have already been working together. They have a draft that exists that's based on some of the information that's being presented to you today. It's just a matter of getting your final consensus and having them move forward to finalize a resolution for both governing bodies to adopt, and then ultimately to have bylaws generally prepared for when this board is stood up. The city and county managers will designate staff members to act as contract managers and liaisons as procurement coordinators. So obviously somebody on each side has to be monitoring and overseeing this process in spite of the fact that this board is going to bring forward recommendations. And I think those people are already in place, but that's just a piece we want to throw in there. There's going to be a joint procurement and contracting process. This is the way that we did the Stedman contract. Both purchasing departments were involved to make sure that it complied with both sides' policies and charters on procurement. At the end of the day, there will be one RFP that's released, but it will meet both governing bodies' criteria. And then whenever a person is awarded or an entity is awarded a contract, there will be dual contracts, and that entity will pay, or the city will pay their portion, and the county will pay their portion separately. The reason it's constructed that way, through conversations with the CFO and with legal, is to ensure that as these funds come into the city and county, each has a responsibility to report back to the state on the way that they spent those funds. This just keeps a clean line between the two finance departments and the spending of the money and the reporting back to the state. And then also, the county is willing to lead the procurement process. So while the two purchasing directors work together, the county will do the final paperwork and push it out and manage that portion of it. And then finally, there will need to be, I believe, an MOU in place between the city and county that spells out this joint procurement process and finance piece of this. So there'll be a resolution that creates the board, and then there will be an MOU that helps guide and direct the finance and procurement part of this. And then finally, there will need to be a contract with a third-party consultant. This is what we're recommending, is that the city and county jointly use opioid funds to contract and hire a third-party consultant who will act as a coordinator for the advisory board and also serve as the experts who monitor performance and evaluate performance of those who receive the funds to ensure that they're compliant with the requirements of the RFPs and the intent of the opioid settlement spending. Transparency and accountability. We are subject, both entities are subject to the Kansas Fights Addiction Act and the Attorney General's Guide for Strategic Allocation and Spending of Funds, which includes those things that are disallowed that we cannot spend the money on. This process is also subject to COMA and CORA. This advisory board or coalition will be subject to Kansas Open Meetings Act and the Kansas Open Records Act. They're both subject to the procurement policies and charters of each governing body. There is a ethics and conflict of interest guidelines that will be built into the resolution and the bylaws for this advisory board to ensure that members who are appointed to that board, if their organization is applying for monies, then they will have to recuse themselves and won't be able to participate in final votes on who should receive the money if there's a conflict of interest. And they'll be required to report that at the front end of those processes. And then finally, there will be web presence where, as RFPs are pushed out, those will be advertised on this web page, and I'm sure that we'll have joint presence on both web pages. So we can put out updates, we can put out data and information on the spending of the money, we can push out the RFP notifications, and keep the public informed on how this process is working, where the money's going, and the effectiveness of the spending. And then the recommended next steps as we move further into the year. The recommended steps for these two governing bodies is to authorize the finalization of a joint resolution between the county and the city, to create the coalition or the advisory board, to allow and permit the final drafting of funding and procurement MOU by the two law departments, authorize the managers to act as the authority to identify and bring forward nominees to the governing bodies, prepare and release a joint RFP for a third-party consultant that we talked about a minute ago, so that we can get that process moving and identify who it is that's going to help coordinate the advisory board, and specifically who is going to do the evaluation, performance evaluation and monitoring of those who receive the money. And then lastly, working through those first 4 bullet points, sometime later this year, launch the coalition training and meetings for those who were selected. And once that's in place, then we will move into phase 2 of implementation, where we will come back to the county commission and the city council and start talking about what the recommendations are on how the money should be allocated percentage-wise for treatment, prevention, harm reduction, et cetera, and start nailing down some of those details so that the coalition can then get to work writing requests for proposals and putting out opportunities for people to receive this money. So with that, that is kind of a quick and high overview of what the recommendations are from staff on city and county sides on how to get this thing rolling in implementation phase 1. And I'll stand for questions, and Mr. Martin and I are both available.
Thank you, Rusty. Councilmember Hoheisel.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess a couple of quick questions. One about the third-party consultant contract. I believe in the report that we were shown after the study, it was like 15% set aside for additional consultation. And I know there's not a desire, at least on this side, to go 15%. So I'm wondering about what's the price tag on that additional consultation?
What I can tell you, and I'll let Dante chime in here, currently the Liquor Tax Coalition is managed in this way. There's a third party that actually administrates and then also does the evaluation piece. It's my understanding that's about $145,000 a year. Is that right, Dante? Pretty close? Okay. So that would be a primary cost. As far as this, as far as the administrative piece, you're correct that the study recommended that about 15% would be set aside for administration, understanding that the governing bodies will have some expense with staff and others to administrate this money. I know on the county side, there was at least some discussion about whether that number was right, whether it was too big or too small. And I think the managers have had some discussion about whether, what level of that money should be spent in that way. So I don't think that's firm. I think that's where we come back in phase 2. Your question is taken well, and it's in discussions that we can bring back a recommendation to the governing bodies on that. But we'd also want the coalition or the governing or the advisory board to weigh in on that as well.
Yeah, if it's over the 13-year lifespan of how we're allocating these funds, that's about $1.5 million that would be for consultation. Is there any way that we could maybe add an additional aspect of the liquor tax allocation and have them administer this as well, or look at this as well?
That's a good question. That's something we can look into. I don't have an answer for you immediately.
What is the current fund? I know we've collected some so far, and it's going to be weighted more in the near term than the long term. The long term, it kind of scales down. So would that be part of the recommendations, is how we can get some of this out immediately, maybe for education purposes and whatnot?
That would be the intent with the advisory board, is to identify how to utilize the funds that have already accumulated, understanding that the dollar amounts are going to decrease over time, and how to strategically allocate that over the lifetime of this settlement. Additionally, there's been discussion about, and it's based on the way that the state, the Sunflower Coalition has administered money at the state level, that a lot of times these contracts that they're pushing out, well, all of them have been one-year contracts, which doesn't allow for a lot of input. Feedback from that process has been that it has not allowed entities and organizations to stand up new programs or necessarily fill gaps with programming that doesn't exist because it's not reliable. They've got 1 year of funding. All they're going to do is supplement what they already have in place because they can't count on this money to go beyond 1 year. So there's discussion that the advisory board coalition in Sedgwick County, Wichita, may choose to do longer term, maybe 3-year contracts, and they'll have to work through and determine what allocation is right to ensure that we have money throughout the life of this 13 to 15 year cycle.
Okay, do we know the current balance in that fund?
We do, and I have paperwork laying over there. I don't remember what it is. I think we're around $1.5 million. Justin, does that sound right?
Okay, and then last question, is there any talk about any county representation or city council representation, or do we want to keep this staff?
We're here today to receive your input. In speaking with legal counsel, there were some reservations about county commission or city council members being part of the advisory board coalition, merely for the fact that if you're involved in the RFP process at the front end, then you're probably going to have to recuse yourself when it comes to a vote in front of the governing body because there's a conflict of interest there where you've been involved in both sides of it. So there's some consideration, there's some legal consideration that I would defer to legal counsel at a later time to address.
Okay, so would maybe an ex officio position be proper, or is it just the fact that we're on there influencing the process at all?
I would defer to Jennifer and Justin, and if they wish to get back with you on that, I understand that as well.
Okay, I appreciate it. That's all that.
They're nodding, they will get back with you on that at a later time.
Hey Rusty, I appreciate the presentation. I just had one technical question on the board makeup. Is medical defined? Is it like a specific doctor or large health organization or small or just anyone in the medical field?
I think it's intentionally left somewhat broad. In discussions, again, looking at the Liquor Tax Coalition and understanding that those who are involved, some may not want to be involved if they think that it's going to be a conflict of interest with them applying. So we're leaving it a little bit broad so that we can bring in somebody from the medical field who has knowledge and experience in this, but we don't want to narrow it so tight that the managers or whomever is responsible for identifying nominees can't find anybody to fit the role and we have a vacancy. Because sometimes we define these so tightly that we have trouble filling the seats or keeping them filled because there's such a small pool of people to fill that, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
I would add some clarity to Councilmember Hoheisel's question. The county balance right now is about $2.5 million. I don't know, does that include the city's balance as well, or is that just the county portion? Okay, so just the county portion is about $2.5 million right now.
I do have a report that the Attorney General's office sent in February that gives balances of all municipalities and all counties, which includes the city of Wichita County, but thanks for correcting me on that.
Yes, sir. I would have one question on that as a follow-up. Do we have any idea, what was the state amount that you had mentioned, Mayor? I'm sorry I didn't write that down. While she's getting that, are there any discussions, and we have the city and the county that's collaborating on use of these funds, who takes the lead on the question about the state funds and how that's going to be deployed? Is there an opportunity there for collaboration?
So I've heard different, Dante and I and the sheriff all went to Overland Park about a week ago, and on the 18th at least, it was on the 18th, to a summit with the Attorney General's office, that the Attorney General's office coordinated to talk about the spending of these funds. There were different ideas thrown out there. One of them was that if you have a governing body or some type of advisory board in place, whoever you designate to be responsible could potentially use these funds as matching funds to help seek other grants from other entities to fill this space, to add more money to the pool. I had an opportunity to talk to a state representative at a different event related to this topic early April or late March, and asked specifically about the state funds, and he had some frustration with the fact that the majority of the funds are tied up at the state level when the state is asking local jurisdictions to do more to help themselves.
That's right.
But he didn't have a solution for that. So I think that this advisory board, once it's in place, would be the group in conjunction with staff that's associated with it to look at opportunities to help either pull those state monies into this jurisdiction to supplement what others are receiving from our RFPs, or if there's opportunities to work with the Sunflower Coalition just to bring it directly into this pool.
Yeah.
I don't know that that's possible, but that would be the goal.
Well, I would hope that it would be an emphasis, let me state publicly, and also for staff in the room, that those that are on this advisory council, I think that we need to place a significant emphasis on the $190 million at the state. I'm certain that the sheriff, the chief of police, I know via ComCare, corrections, I think everyone in this room could admit that Sedgwick County, City of Wichita, disproportionately the burden of addiction and substance use and the impact that it's having on our community compared to the rest of the state is disproportionate in its impact. Opioid addiction, substance use addiction is impacting our nation and impacting our state. But what's happening here in Sedgwick County in our region is unique. So I think that conversation needs to be had with the state and accessing that to see how they can assist the efforts that are going on here to see if we can reverse some of these really dangerous trajectories. So I think that needs to be an emphasis of this council, or somebody needs to be reaching out to the Attorney General's office and having these discussions.
Interestingly, the state had recently completed a needs assessment. We had Stedman completed a needs assessment for Sedgwick County and Wichita. They recently completed one, and it hasn't been published yet. It was presented last week when we were at that summit. And they had county-by-county information and data, and every county is a little bit different, the way that they manage that process. It shows that the needs are different across each county and each region of the state. And it gave some guidance on how people ought to think about spending the money. And again, at the state level, I think the Sunflower Coalition has done a good job of getting money out early. But I think some of the frustration has been voiced is that the money is mainly going to supplement existing programs and not to create new programs that fill gaps. And so if there's a way that we can work with the state to better utilize those funds at a local level, based on the needs assessments of the local level, at the local level, that would be ideal, but we're just not there yet. I think if we can get a coalition or an advisory board in place, then we can probably dive deeper into that work at that point, sometime later this year.
Thanks, Rusty. Any other questions?
Rusty, I had a couple questions. Number one, out of the 20 cities in Sedgwick County, have other cities said that they would like to be part of pooling the dollars together?
I have no conversation with any of those cities that have indicated a desire. What we heard at the summit, I sat with some folks from Wyandotte County and Johnson County, and we had folks there from Park City, and there's another city from Sedgwick County that was there. A lot of these cities, the smaller cities particularly, had voiced in the room that as the money came to them, it was not clear what they should do with it, and it ended up in the hands of police chiefs and fire chiefs. Basically, we have this money, police and fire, you know what to do with it, do something with it. And so it wasn't a real strategic approach to spending this for prevention, treatment, recovery. It was more directed at Narcan for immediate harm reduction on the street, and those types of things, which is, there's nothing wrong with that, but they just didn't have a long-term strategy. And the money amounts were so small that there wasn't a lot they could do with it. So, but I mean, it's worth the conversation, but currently nobody's reached out to us, and we haven't directly reached out or spoke with others about that.
The other question is a little bit premature, but I do believe that we need to have this discussion, and that is regarding homelessness and the multi-agency center. I wasn't sure if that has been part of the conversation about how maybe some of these dollars can be utilized to help some of our individuals facing homelessness that also are facing addiction issues.
Yes, ma'am, it has. Mayor, the city manager, as a matter of fact, brought that up in the process pretty early on. And so that's been part of the conversation is these dollars are going to help. Largely, they're intended to help those who are uninsured, underinsured. And that's where your gaps are, is in those communities that don't have insurance and therefore can't get into private treatment centers who require a pay source and insurance. And so that would directly go toward the population that you're talking about would be part of that. So it's been intentionally considered and discussed since the city manager brought that up.
Yeah. Other questions? Commissioner Howe.
Mr. Chairman, Madam Mayor, I just want to, is this board that's being created, is it planning to be continuously engaged through this entire process for the entire time, or is this just an initial effort to kind of get things where the money, get the program defined how we want it to be defined, and then their purpose ceases at that point?
Currently, the way that the first draft of the resolution and through the conversations that have been had so far was that this board would have a finite life, but right now it would be slated to exist as long as the monies existed. So if the monies exist through a 13 to 15 year life cycle, this board would continue to exist until that time, and then once these settlement funds have been exhausted, it would sunset at that point. That's how it's been tentatively envisioned and written into the resolution, pending discussion from the governing bodies.
And I appreciate the questions from Councilman Hoheisel. Again, I think knowing how much money we have right now, and he used the word that he said it was scaled down. I don't know if that's an understanding on how the money will flow in, but you mentioned $15.5 million, and someone's already mentioned 13 or 14 or 15 year process to get that full amount, 15.5. So just simple math here, I mean, we may have a larger chunk of money at the moment, but we're talking on average a little bit more than $1 million a year on average. And again, considering the size of the city's budget, the size of the county's budget, you know, you guys have a huge investment in trying to solve homeless issues in the community. We're focused on mental health and I think substance abuse. One of my, just an observation, but considering the size of our budget, that's really not that much money, considering the great need, if you will. So, you know, I feel like this is a lot of consultation, 15%, a lot of people involved trying to figure out how to spend $1 million over 15, you know, $1 million a year for 15 years. It seems like it's not a very efficient approach. It's a very complicated approach. We have an opportunity. I know that everyone likes to say city, county does everything together, and there's reasons to do that. This is one of those things where, you talk about consolidation. Really, my personal opinion is, let's let one of the two bodies lead entirely. Let's just make it simpler. This is a proposal that's so complicated, and I'm bothered by the amount of cost of administrating this program. And there's so many voices in the room. I don't know that this is the right approach to figure out how to spend $1 million a year. I think we have a plan here, but I think honestly, the city would do a good job or the county would do a good job. I would rather just say, we would entrust you to have this revenue, do the best you can with it. Let the city council use staff and figure out what to do. If we had the money, I think there's a long line waiting for sobering beds, and people need substance abuse addiction treatments. I'm actually not a fan of the Narcan because I believe, I've talked to law enforcement about this, it's popular, but at the end of the day, it actually, I think, has a mixed message to the users that they can use these drugs and they can have a solution if you go too far. What you may not realize is when people get a Narcan injection, usually it's 3, 4, 5 injections. One is not usually enough. And so I think we're sending the wrong message to them. I'd like to see more sobering beds, more treatment for substance abuse. And if the county had the revenue, I would like to see us focus on that with existing programs, expand that, because there's waiting lists. There's people who can't get in. To me, that's the low-hanging fruit. We have people right now in the community that says, I would go through this program if I had a place to do it. They can't, because there's not a place for them to go. They have to wait to get in. That to me is like screaming for attention. Meanwhile, we have money, we're talking about spending it in different ways and not addressing the existing problem. And we have a very complex approach to this. I would rather say, if we want to go down this path, I would actually advocate to give the money to the city and trust them to do the best they can. I would rather do that than make a complicated approach to spend such a small amount of money for such a large problem.
Let's have that discussion. I think that's a great point of contention here, is that administration fees or study fees are just so exuberant, and what people want are the actual solutions. And I know that on the county side, you do deal with health and ComCare. Those are your expertise. That is not the expertise of the city of Wichita. If you look at the 16 departments in the city of Wichita, it is not there. And so, as I'm looking at all this information, I'd like to hear from this council to see if there is an interest of speeding this up so that what's actually needed, which are beds, if we can use those dollars towards that solution.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you. Just in response to the Narcan, we did do an initial buy. There was a need out there, but a lot of partners have stepped up into the gaps to help provide that service for people, which has saved a number of lives. But I do appreciate that point. Just a curious question here. How much of this would rely on the direction of county or the city council as far as what we'd like to see focused on? Talking with some of my peers, I think, and also with the study, the 4 areas that I saw that make a lot of sense is education piece, trying to get into schools to stop this before it happens. A medical detox specifically for people without insurance, I think that is a big gap. Some program to help supplement some of the things that are going on in jail, because when people are in jail, they dry out. That's a good time to be able to try and really get to them, so that way they don't go back out on the street and start using again. And then again, MAC adjacent programs to to help with the population that we have in the MAC, try and get them into a rehab and available beds as well. So those are the 4 areas that I see a need for. So how much of that would come back to us for direction?
If, depending on how you want the governance to go, if you have an advisory board, you could give direction. The advisory board is going to look at the strategic plan and come back and say, here are the areas that we think would be most impactful at the front end with this money. And that's where you have the opportunity to influence how you believe the money should be spent. Ultimately, you're the one who makes the final decision on how the money is spent and what it's spent for.
Okay, and I'd love to hear from any of my colleagues on this side or that side about the areas that they see, the areas of need as well. I outlined, I think those are 4 really instrumental topics to dealing with the crisis. And I do believe that it also matches what the study came back and said as well. So I don't know if there's any other areas that you guys see a need in and want to focus on as well.
Before we move to that, can I just add another point of discussion? So currently, as of through 2024, there were $2.895 million. Another 59,000 would be added in 2025. So far, the dollars available on the city side is 2.955 million, just for point of discussion. So county has 2.5, so
It's $5 million.
this is sizable amount of dollars that we could be making progress on. And I can tell you from firsthand experience, seeing a lot of our individuals across the community that are facing homelessness and a mental health/substance use challenge. If we could use those dollars to help with what's happening currently, I believe those are better dollars being utilized. And I understand education is important, but right now we have individuals literally sleeping on our streets. And they are facing a challenge that if they had a bed, could that be part of that solution? And so I would be interested in something along those lines, because I know that a lot of those individuals do not have insurance or are underinsured.
I'll echo both Councilman Hoheisel and Commissioner Howe. I think what I've heard from industry experts universally is medical detox beds. We're not the Board of Health. You're the Board of Health. I think that falls under your jurisdiction. I think a lot of this is duplication. The report at 15% is going to come back with the exact same thing that was in the original point, that we need medical detox beds. So we're paying 15% to get the answer that we already have, when we could use that 15% to leverage more resources towards our community. And I think you make a very good point. This is a little over $1 million a year. We spend that on typical votes on every single vote. And so this is what I hear from the industry, and I would be comfortable with the county taking lead, knowing that we all have the same mission of medical detox beds, and that seems as the number one need for the community. And let's get rid of the 15% and just begin to implement the program.
Mayor, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Commissioner. I just wanted to point out from the strategic plan that was submitted by Stedman and originally presented to the commission and the council, I just want to remind you of the categories that they recommended you allocate funds to. 10% to community outreach and education, 25% to integrated care, 11% to overdose prevention, 39% to treatment capacity, expansion of treatment capacity, and then the remainder, the 15% for the administration that you talked about previously. The only reason I wanted to highlight that for you is that almost all of your discussion is centered on the 39% for expansion of treatment capacity, but not the other categories, although Councilmember Hoheisel did talk about education as a piece of it. But I don't believe any of your solutions right now would get into integrated care or overdose prevention, which were part of the strategic plan.
Yeah, I would wholeheartily agree with that. This is more than just detox beds. The challenge of the opioid and substance use epidemic in our community is certainly detox beds are important, and we have a plan coming through ComCare Crisis, the new ComCare Crisis Center. And I'm certain that the decision will be made, so some of those dollars will help supplement those programs. But as Rusty had said earlier, the biggest challenges in the community are in the gaps that aren't being met right now. If it was just the county implementing the plan or the city implementing the plan, I'm open to that discussion, but I think what needs to happen is an advisory council of people that are experts in this space that are advising on the use of these dollars. What I've heard today is there's not a whole lot of experts in this space sitting at this table. And I just think that's, I mean, we're going to have a different opinion on Narcan, but we are not experts in this space. We need to bring people to the table that can advise from this community. These are community dollars. These are litigation, settlement dollars coming to our taxpayers, not bodies of government. And we need to bring them to the table and let them advise how this needs to be used. I can tell you, I learn something every time I get at the table with Harold and Chad from SAC. Every time I get at the table with the people from ComCare, I learn something. Every time I listen to what's going on with those that are homeless advocates and how substance use and mental health is ravaging parts of that community, I learn something. So I think whether it's the city or the county jointly making the decision, there's two things that I think have to happen. Number one, we have to pool these dollars together. $2.5 million doesn't go as far as $5.5 million. We've got to pull the dollars together, and we've got to have an advisory council of experts in this community, lived experienced people in this community advising us on things that we don't know. So those are the two things. However we make this come together with those two, in my view, those two premises at play, then I'm happy with that. But I'm very much in favor of the council advising, of community experts, whether it's the county leading it, the city leading it, or both. I'm happy to it. I do agree, though, 15% is too much of a fee that gets sucked off the top of this thing. And I think there's been discussions of what that looks like long-term and how we reduce that fee. I think that was just allotted in from a budget based on previous. I can't imagine this thing gets to 15%, and that should be an emphasis of driving that down. But
Stedman indicated that they thought that was probably a little high, but they were using averages from other jurisdictions that they've worked with or research that they've done. So they didn't want to understate it and then have us come back later and shrug our shoulders and go, how'd you come up with a number that was too low? And when you're talking about gaps, sitting through the time with Stedman and then going to some of these other summits and events, the gaps include not only medical detox, which is very important in different settings, but also the recovery maintenance. When somebody gets through the primary program, currently there's not much out there to help them sustain beyond.
correct.
Coordination of care right now, if they're being treated by ComCare for one thing and by a physician by another, and they may have a substance problem, there's problems with coordination of care and sharing of information, and that just keeps coming up over and over again. And while that's a little bit bigger than the settlement money, that's one of the goals, is to try through these years of using the settlement money and having a group that's helping guide that some of those problems start to be addressed and resolved to help the broader resolve the broader issue that exists across this community that contributes to reoccurrences and continuations of addiction.
That's good. Commissioner Blumenthal.
The conversation over here, Mayor, you took the words right out of my mouth as far as get it in front of the people who have the skill sets, the subject matter expertise, the fees, I just don't want to see the same fee you did. And I would be open to discuss something to where maybe there's a representative from each governing body, but let's roll it back mostly to subject matter experts to help us. And one other thing, I want to make sure we don't get scope creep and stick to opioids. I know we're talking about, and we know that is a lot of homelessness, but I want to make sure we're fixing people that went through the terrible things from, the opioids and everything's out there, so.
I would just like to add a couple things. To Rusty's point, he mentioned, I think, and I don't want to miscommunicate what you said, but maybe finding some type of programming to fill the gaps. I'd like to consider using the money to expand programs that we already have that could potentially close some of those gaps, rather than trying to reinvent some type of new programming. I think we have really good resources, but they're all underfunded.
That's right.
And I think, there's so much opportunity for the money for programs that we already have. And so I think that should be part of the conversation. The mayor mentioned that mental health was not specifically like the city's department, but we do play a huge role with housing, public works, police, EMS on you guys' side. I do think the city has a big seat at the table as well. I don't know that I really necessarily care who facilitates the money or who, I think we all need to have that conversation as we are now, and I think that it is important to have the subject matter experts, but I think our community is desperate for results, and we've been talking to talk some more, and we have, been lucky enough in a really terrible situation to receive some of these funds, and I want to make sure that we're not just continuing to talk the talk. We really need results, and that is what our community is desperate for. So however that trickles down and whatever that ends up looking like, whoever decides, I just hope that we use the money for the best potential help for our community that we possibly can. So I don't know that, I do think that the city and the county need to talk about it together, including the state. They hold a huge portion of that money, but I'm really focused on the results. I do think it is important for, as Blue Ball mentioned, that our community is ready for some results, and I want to make sure that we do keep it focused on opioid. Otherwise, it can really, disperse very quickly with not a huge amount of money. So, thank you.
I think the best way to get the dollars flowing is to stop talking about it, frankly. I mean, we have a plan. If it's just about the bureaucracy of who's involved, not involved, I don't think that should be a barrier to getting the dollars flowing. And again, there is an advisory council that's going to help advise on these. Q2, Q3, Q4 is when things starting to get implemented. That's right around the corner. I mean, here we are at the end of April. So the best way to get dollars flowing is to stop talking about it and actually just implement the plan, like put our foot on the gas and go. There's things about this plan I may not be 100% in favor of, but I don't want to clog this thing up because of discussions about the bureaucracy of it. The fees, that's genuine. It's a genuine conversation we have to have. I don't give a damn if it's the city or the county. Like, let's get the advisory council going and let's get the dollars implemented. There's people dying in these streets. Like, let's get the dollars implemented. So I agree 100%, Councilmember Ballard, but talking about it's going to delay the flow of these dollars.
Nope, I agree. Oh, sorry, Pete, you want to go? Nope, I agree wholeheartedly. I'm okay with signing on to this. We can work through any issues as it moves along. I'd just say the education piece I do think is important because it stops the flow of people who are getting into it. I know we got a lot of great partners out there who are doing work and it's showing some progress in the schools. So I do think that should be a piece that should be explored as well. And it sounds like it's part of the overall plan, but I agree with you. Let's get this process going.
Thank you, Chairman and Madam Mayor. Great discussion, and historically, unless somebody can say otherwise, I really like that you're kind of following the model of the Liquor Tax Coalition. That's been around for a while. It's proven successful. It's been non-controversial. It comes in front of our boards to rubber stamp the trust of that Liquor Tax Coalition and in the disbursements under their mission. So your first comments on this presentation about using that structure falls really in line with what some of this discussion is, and I wholly endorse. I was asking the chairman. I'm ready to make a motion to approve the coalition and let's go forward. But I know we're having a discussion instead. But I do like that. The question, then two questions. The third party or this fee discussion. Was that for a consultant and staff, or is it
No.
just?
Right now, the only expense, conversation revolved around internal spending.
Yeah.
Whether a certain portion of
Sure.
this should be held back to utilize for internal spending, i.e.
Okay.
Early on, we bought a piece of equipment for the Science Center, but then we stopped spending. Some money has been expended to buy Narcan for law enforcement. So the question was, should a portion of this money, a small portion of this money be held back by either entity or both entities to be able to fund internal needs that would not have to go out to RFP, or should basically 100% of this be used strictly for RFPs, including to pay for a consultant that would help monitor and evaluate performance of those who receive the money.
Okay.
I don't think there's different opinions and philosophies on that, and obviously the people are the final decider on that. Right now, the only obligation would be we need somebody who will have the expertise to evaluate monitor and evaluate performance of those who receive the money. And I'm hesitant to put that on the back of any staff member of the city or county to do that.
Yeah,
I think it's
right.
a third-party independent needs to probably do that because they can help mentor and retrain those providers if they're having trouble meeting their key performance measures.
Okay.
But beyond that, I don't know that there's any direct obligation. I know that when it comes to Narcan, as long as the federal dollars hold out, KDADS has been supplying Narcan to various entities. We've received a shipment to the medical director's office, which is being used by various county departments, including EMS, who's initiated a leave behind program. If they go to an overdose scene and the person revives and doesn't go to the hospital, or even if they do, they'll leave behind a dose or two just to ensure that they don't die tomorrow from the same thing. You know, but there's other ways to fund that besides this money. So ultimately, it's the governing body's decision as to whether 95% of this money is pushed out through RFPs or whether 85%,
Okay.
100%.
All right, well, I would just conclude that I would think that a intelligent coalition structure similar could actually come back to us and say, hey, we really think it should fall under the county health department guidelines or combined whatever, versus us making that decision right now. If it said, hey, the county health department should run it, then I'd be thinking, well, then some of that expense of the time and personnel and all whatever legal that the county should be able to, invoice for some of those expenses. So I guess I resolve back to your first statement about duplicating the coalition, and I appreciate the mayor asking about other cities in the county. I would agree that it's probably a minor amount of money, and it might just complicate matters further. I mean, the invite is good, but based on what we went through with COVID and other things, I think it's good with.
The only hurdle that I've heard regarding mixing of monies is the reporting back to the state.
Yeah.
And that's a matter for financial
probably
and legal folks to advise you on whether that's doable or not. But that's been the primary conversation.
Yeah.
Is
I assume that the state and federal requirements on this money is a little bit different than what we have control over in the local liquor tax coalition, so it's expanded. Thank you for letting me say something.
I was kind of thinking the same thing Commissioner Meitzner was. He was saying invoice. I was thinking, is there an opportunity to pay back into the fund anything that wasn't direct? Basically, we're just showing our direct cost, where we're not taking anything additional other than our actual costs. So whether that's an invoice, whether that's a, hey, 15%, you only use 7% of it, we'll donate it once a year. We'll put the other 8% back into the fund for the next year, something of that nature, maybe.
Thank you, Chairman and Madam Mayor. Just one question I have is on this liquor tax revenue that comes in and consultant and all that, what's the amount of consultant revenue that how much money do they get paid for what they provide? Say what again? Okay. And that basically goes on forever. And I think those programs change from time to time. So there's always, if you will, a constant effort to improve those programs and account for what they're actually doing in the community. So there is accountability and reporting and if you will, changing programs over time. So I think there's a reason for that, perhaps. I don't feel the same way about this one. I'm very concerned about the fact that, again, just this one thing alone, we're talking about, if nothing changes, around $1.5 million goes to this consulting group. Just for the record, when they presented it at our staff meeting a few weeks ago, a couple months back, I actually had a lot of concerns at that time. So I've not been really comfortable about this plan. Looking at the four initiatives that they've come up with, there's overlap between the idea of education and prevention. There's overlap. So part of prevention is education. Prevention might, again, if you want to have another discussion, I know we might disagree here, but talk to Sheriff Easter and others about how Narcan, is it helping or is it hurting our community? I think there's another perspective. That Narcan is not necessarily the solution to this problem. So, again, one of the initiatives here is distribution of Narcan. And then I was going on to say, this integrated care, the entire second thing, which is 25% of the total amount here, we're gonna do this whether we approve this plan or not. We're already doing everything on that list. And so this integrated care, in my opinion, is a large amount of money between integrated care and the consultant fee. That's more money than our treatment programs in this program. 39% for treatment under their recommendations and 40% for administration of this and integrated care we're already doing. I think this is a huge mistake. And again, let the record show, I'm sure this is not going to pass. I'm the one that's advocating for consolidated government. I would rather see Wichita take the lead, or if you want to trust us, let us take the lead. We can simplify this. And you talk about speeding things up, Mr. Chairman. I think what we're doing right now is we're starting on a very long process, a very, very, very complicated solution. The fastest way to solve this problem is to talk to SAC, a third-party provider, and have them ramp up their ability to provide some services at about $1 million more per year in this community. We have money right now to get them started. You can do this immediately. We could work with existing staff. I think this whole plan ought to be, we started down this path with a consultant, and I think we're ended up in a very, not the best position. And honestly, I know this is probably going to pass. And like a lot of other votes, I'm probably going to vote minority here because I think we can do better. And I'm sorry, we're down at the 11th hour trying to put our final touch on a complicated plan, and it's hard to go backwards. But we can go backwards, and there is a better way.
Yeah.
And actually, I think that my opinion is the way I'm advocating for it actually is faster. So you want to be expedient, get things, money to the people who need it. I would say this is not the plan we should be following.
Yeah.
Consolidated government means we trust one side or the other. And we have people in the community that can do these services right now. I think it's horrible that we're going to spend 39% on treatment and 40% on administration and something we're already doing.
A couple of thoughts. Number one is we're going to get the approval on the final plan. If we don't like the way the final plan works, we don't vote for the final plan. But I think it's asinine to think that we're going to sit in this room and figure out how these dollars need to get deployed and that we're on the ground and understand how this is, our community is being impacted by this. I don't think that we have a real grip on that. Is there a problem, Tom or Justin, maybe Jennifer, is there, with one government doing it, can the city of Wichita just give us the $2.9 million that you have so we can administer this program?
Chairman Justin Wagner, County Councilor, I'll field that. If Jennifer wants to supplement it, she can as well. I don't believe we've looked into that specifically. I will say that the state statute that controls how these monies are spent and the MOA that the Kansas Attorney General's office entered into with all recipients of the money, including Sedgwick County and the city of Wichita, clarifies this money can only be spent for certain things, including prevention of opioid use or substance abuse. It's unclear if paying another municipality is an allowable use. I think we could reach out to the Attorney General's office and get clarity on that, if that's permissible, because right now that's not clear to me. Jennifer, did you want to?
I agree. I think it does say in the MOU that the monies may be pooled, so I believe that, we would just need to finalize that with the Attorney General's office.
So pooling the monies is, we know that's an acceptable purpose, but we don't know if you can just give it to us to administer those funds. So that's unclear at this moment.
That's correct.
Okay. Other questions, comments?
Just, thank you for Chairman. Just, I guess my response to that is, if we have a contract, let's say, SAC, for example, I'm not saying that's the right solution, and the amount of money that's needed to pay them every year is whatever it is. Why can't both city and county provide some of the funding for that side by side? It doesn't have to. Again, I don't know that I see what you said just now as a barrier to what I've said earlier. It's not a barrier.
I think you're correct, Commissioner Howell. I think that's another way. In the county, I know we did 2 or 3 different expenditures before we pulled the money together about 2 years ago, I think, before this plan was hatched to pool the monies together. Those expenses were permissible under state law, and the AG's office was comfortable with those. And so we did something kind of like what you're mentioning, Commissioner Howell, back then, and there certainly would be that ability. There's nothing requiring the city and county to do this at this point.
So may I ask, Commissioner, is the biggest sticking point, obviously you want one governing body to manage, is it the advisory council that you think is going to slow this down?
We have great staff. We have great experiences doing this type of services already in this community, and there's a waiting list.
Yes.
So we're creating a whole nother way of handling this problem, and we've already been doing this for a long time. And frankly, if we had more money, we would do more right now. There is a money problem.
Yes.
So there's people out there that need services right this minute. we have money in the bank waiting to go. And we're creating a whole new process, which I would argue is incredibly complex for actually what I consider to be a fairly small amount of money, considering our budgets and the great need that we are experiencing right now.
I appreciate the clarity. My view only, I'm going to support this because I do think that I want to bring the community into this conversation. I do not feel comfortable, and I think we do have great staff, the health department and ComCare and other places, but I do think the community needs to be involved in this, and they're issuing recommendations. We have the final say. We have the final say how these dollars get allocated, but I want the community at the table in this discussion.
What does the timeline look like? Do we know? And I'm
Rusty?
sorry if I missed some of that.
I know phase 2 is Q3, Q4. I did have a question on the MOU. What's the timing on the MOU? That MOU would probably need to be executed and finalized in June, correct?
Yeah, if the governing bodies had consensus on kind of what we've laid out here today, legal counsel on both sides have worked together and they have a resolution drafted and they can clean that up pretty quick. A financial MOU would follow suit pretty quickly. I think they've already begun work on that. So I would assume that we could get it on an agenda in early June. I mean, we're maybe in May. We have very few meetings in May though, so it would probably be June.
Okay.
And then as soon as we can get people identified and brought back to the council and the commission for ratification, then you can have a board stood up here in the second quarter, maybe by the end of the second quarter.
Sure. I guess I don't have the same concerns on the time. I don't think this is a very complicated process. I think we've done this time and time and time again. This doesn't seem complicated to me. I think, off the top of my head, I have 6 or 7 recommendations to the county manager now who I think he should appoint to this. I think we can have these ideas and these things vetted out in a couple of weeks. I don't think this is a complicated process at all. And I want to pool the dollars to impact the community. So I'm not going to make a motion, but I'd like to get some consensus to give this group the strategic plan authority to move forward and get these. So I would be, can we get a consensus to move this plan forward on our side?
I'm supportive as long as we keep our foot on the gas. Our community, like you said, is dying every single day, and we have an opportunity with these dollars, and we need to get them allocated ASAP.
Yes, agreed.
Same here, I'm supportive as long as it's accelerated.
Me too.
Commissioner?
I actually would put a timeline on it and say by the May 20th meeting on the city council side that this would have to be in front of us. I think it expedites, when you actually put a date on it, you actually expedite the process. And I think that part of this is we're all asking for the same thing, which is speed up the process and actually help people. And so if we have the dollars and we have a plan now and we need to allocate individuals in expert areas, social services, parole, probation, medical, mental health, academic, court, and law enforcement, if we can have something to vote on by May 20th, I would feel more comfortable.
Agreed. Go ahead, Commissioner.
And again, I'll probably be opposed only since I think there's a better way. And so I hate to be that way, but I really would advocate for consolidation effort, and I would like to simplify this entire process. So hate to say this, but I'll probably vote the other side.
Yeah.
With regards to an MOU, let me just say this. We still have some unfinished business with MABCD, MAPD merger. We're not done yet. I'm not going to say any more than that. But we're waiting for Wichita to sign some paperwork right now. We've been waiting for a long time, and it's still not signed. So every once in a while, we have, for whatever reason, disagreements, and things don't get signed. It's complicated.
It is. This is getting signed. We're going to get this signed. So if we can have consensus to move this forward, again, I don't think we need a motion, but I think we have consensus on our side if we can move this forward. Okay. Rusty, thank you. And thanks to everybody that's been a part of this process to this point. It's a big lift, but it's a big need.
Thank you.
Okay, Madam Clerk, next item, please.
Item B, Blue Ribbon Committee Shared Services.
Our next item regarding Blue Ribbon Committee, the topic really is about shared services. This is something that, as Commissioner Howell has mentioned, we've done some of those shared services with MABCD. Now we're talking about, obviously, the opioid dollars. And now, finally, we're going to talk about a specific department that could have some shared opportunities. So I would like to invite up Park Director Reggie Davidson to start that conversation.
Before you get started, congratulations, Reggie, on your new role and promotion.
Thank you. So I'm here to talk a little bit about shared services that we can have between Parks and Rec and the county. And want to give an overview of that and then transition into some of the next steps and some of the options that we have as we look at options, how do we move forward. So a general overview, the city of Wichita and Sedgwick County can enhance accessibility, efficiency, and overall experience for residents and park users and cultural organizations by simplifying the registration and improving the programming and strengthening long-term planning and maximizing the effectiveness of cultural arts and funding programs. So the Unified Parks and Rec program and registration, the city of Wichita currently is working and exploring opportunities to develop shared programming at Lake Afton, Sedgwick County, as well as the Northeast Sedgwick County Park. This partnership would enhance the quality of reach of recreational operations offerings while ensuring programs are tailored to the needs and interests of residents. So part of this process, Wichita currently has a centralized registration platform that integrates across the multiple city departments. And this allows us to streamline how we register for programs, events, and making a single interface for our community to access services. And it basically creates a one-stop shop for being able to access services throughout the city and different departments. Extending this platform to Sedgwick County will reduce confusion, eliminate duplication of systems, and make it easier for residents across both jurisdictions to access programs. Currently, both the county and the city are looking at a comprehensive park master plan process to shape the future of respective park systems. Aligning these efforts could create a shared regional vision for parks and recreation. A coordinated planning process will allow both jurisdictions to identify common goals, strengthen the investments, reduce duplication, and ensure that public resources are used in a more efficient and effective manner. So the next steps we're looking at in this process is identify shared programming opportunities for the city and county team to review and evaluate collaborative program strategies for both public spaces owned by each agency. Also evaluate the system capabilities. Access to RecTrack and the Evolve Guide to integrate county programs into that system, and establish an implementation team from a collaborative city and county team to oversee the integration. And part of that is moving also into a standardized process and training to align registration policies and conduct joint staff training, as well as developing an outreach plan that will communicate this to the community on what this looks like. And right now, the city also has a RFP out for a comprehensive park master plan, and we can review this and have a shared vision and scope for the master planning and revise the city RFP to include the county parks. So this kind of gives an overview of what the next steps are, where we currently are in looking at options for joint programming, and I'll kind of lead into Lindsay to be able to come up and discuss some of the things with cultural arts.
Thanks, Reggie. Good morning, Council, Commission. Lindsay Banc, Director of Arts and Cultural Services for the city. So I'll walk through some of the cultural arts opportunities. In general, the city of Wichita has a longstanding cultural funding program which provides support to a broad spectrum of arts and cultural organizations, including performing and visual arts educational programs, individual artists, and community-based initiatives. As part of the city's cultural arts strategic plan that was adopted about a year ago today, the Division of Arts and Cultural Services is working to redesign our funding model to better reflect the community priorities, placing a greater emphasis on measurable outcomes, impact, and equitable access. So we're not necessarily completely turning the program upside down, but we're really trying to make it performance-based versus grandfathered in approaches. With this, we do have a cultural funding committee that is appointed by city council members and also some members of our appointed through our Arts Council to advise that process and really to make formal recommendations to city council for approval. Just for some general background, the city supports 9 cultural institutions with direct funding, and in our competitive grant program, we have about between 40 and 50 recipients. Conversely, the county supports 7 cultural arts organizations with direct funding, and there is some overlap between both bodies. There are 5 organizations that receive funding from both the city and county. A unified city-county cultural funding model would increase access to public funding for arts and cultural organizations and support a more inclusive and equitable system. Additionally, a joint model could align priorities and strengthen coordination between the city and county-supported institutions, minimize duplication, really administrative, annual reporting, et cetera, and provide a more consistent and sustainable financial support. That's something that we hear from all of our fundees, is that sustainability model is really important. So we're looking, part of what the city's approach to addressing our cultural funding program is to look at a tiered multi-year approach so that organizations know how to plan for their future. And it's something that came up through the Blue Ribbon Committee is an organization or an ad hoc group, the Attractions Council, which is facilitated by Visit Wichita. It's really a lot of players from throughout the community in the arts and cultural sector that could be utilized to help develop a new funding model. The Attraction Council brings together both publicly funded and independent cultural organizations and provides a space for collaboration and strategic discussion. Engaging the Attractions Council can help ensure the funding model reflects the needs and perspectives of a broad range of cultural institutions and their specific needs. This input will support stronger partnerships, more effective resource use, and a more vibrant and connected cultural sector. And looking at what the next steps could be for cultural arts, ultimately we need to facilitate some sort of planning session with city and county staff to outline the funding model of who's paying for what and how that administrative flow could work. And then we obviously want to engage our key stakeholders, those organizations who would be directly impacted by any shift in their current funding model and shaping future models. I believe that's all I have. Would you like me to pass it on to Blue Ribbon Committee or Bob?
Thank you, Lindsay, and thank you, Reggie, for the presentations. We will invite one more speaker. Before I do that, I wanted to make mention that it was exactly a year ago, last year, that we restarted this conversation about parks, arts, and recreation. And it does take a while, but just know that work is always happening behind the scenes so that the train can keep moving along. And I'm really grateful to the city staff as well as the county staff for making sure that this conversation continued. Among one of the things that happened last year in April was asking for some stakeholders to just come together and start discussing this idea of more shared services. And so a group of community leaders came together and just started the conversation. And so one of those community leaders is Harvey Swanson. So he has some information to share. Would you like to go up to the podium?
Good morning, Chairman Beatty and the members of the commission, the County Commission, Mayor Wu, and members of the Wichita City Council. I'm here on behalf of a group who've chosen to call ourselves Committed Community Leaders on Shared Services. Our group of 11, which has been kind of an evolving number of individuals, came together as a result of the invitation on the April Banc of 2024 to discuss this issue. And over the course of the last year, we've had several meetings. Misty Bruckner with Wichita State University helped lead our conversations. We've met 6 times as a group. Some of us then also met directly with affected cultural recreation organizations. And we came together to discuss what we would recommend. And our purpose, we believe shared services between the city and the county should go beyond efficiency and cost savings. They represent a chance to build a stronger and more vibrant community, and by streamlining procedures, we can better fund, maintain, and ensure accessibility to parks, recreational parks, and cultural institutions. In evaluating the programs that we looked at and discussing them, we had a series of principles that guided our conversations. First of all, we tried to put people first. The families will have better parks, well-maintained, to enjoy. Artists will have more opportunities to showcase their work, and community space will thrive with new energy. The commitment to shared services goes beyond budget considerations. It's about creating Wichita where resources are used wisely, services are seamless, and every resident benefits from a government working together for the greater good. We had identified some policy goals which are set forth in the materials that you sent, but essentially our policy goals were to provide services to citizens at the same level at a lower cost or better services for the same cost, to improve efficiency in government service, eliminate duplication of cost, simplify operations, improve communications, coordination, and cooperation among service providers, enhance the quality of life in Wichita, and provide innovative solutions for better Wichita. As a result of our work, we came together and made several recommendations. They are set forth in more detail in the report, but essentially our recommendations are that you implement a shared services model for recreations, park, and cultural arts. You develop a shared services financial model for the budgets going forward, and you adopt a comprehensive recreation, parks, and cultural arts funding model. We recommend developing these financial models and the service models as quickly as possible, and we fully support the actions that are proposed to be taken today as a positive step toward achieving our committee recommendations: the Unified Park and Recreational Programming and Registration, the Joint Parks Master Planning, and the City Council Joint Funding. Our committee has not disbanded. We have offered to the two bodies our services in considering and assisting in evaluation other shared services activities in the future. We believe interlocal cooperation is not new, and we urge the city and county to continue to seek ways to cooperate in the process of improvement in the provision of the services to our citizens and to continue to improve the quality of life of all residents. But thank you very much for the opportunity to be here today, and thank you for considering and engaging in this conversation.
Thank you, Harvey. Appreciate it.
Thank you again, and I really appreciate that community members want to get engaged in this conversation. And as you can see, it does take coordinated efforts in terms of providing information that is readily available to everybody, and then individuals wanting to gather and start coming up with some solutions. While the recommendations are not all going to be taken, city staff has come up with things that are great first steps. And I think that Lindsay and Reggie did a great job in finding a way forward. So this is an opportunity that I see where local governments, city and county, coming together to see where we can best utilize resources, because these resources are provided by taxpayers, and the end user is still the taxpayer, whether it's a city of Wichita taxpayer or a county taxpayer, they're the same person. And so making sure that we are better at efficient and effectiveness in government is exactly what we need to start doing more of. And so I'm really grateful to the community members that wanted to gather together and continue talking about this.
Yeah, very good. Okay. Lindsay, Reggie, Harvey, thank you for your comments. Do you have any questions or any feedback?
I would just say that I've heard from several constituents already that I don't think understand what this means, what it looks like. Some would say that our Parks Department needs more money. We know that it already needs more staff. And we've had some positions that have been hard to fill. So just for conversation, I think that potentially there needs to be some type of big town hall or something so that the community can come together outside of these little circles and these little pockets that maybe understand, even if some of us disagree on some of it, that we really need to educate the community on what does that mean. Specifically on the parks merger is mostly what I'm talking about.
Okay, very good.
I think one thing that excites me about this is that it is just streamlining the process for residents. So I really love the idea, thank you, Reggie, that people that visit Sedgwick County Park can use city's recreational facilities. I think that's a win for users. I mean, Sedgwick County Park, people perceive that as part of Wichita predominantly, and most people don't even know it's Sedgwick County. So when they show up, they may not know of recreation opportunities. I think that's a win. I think the collaborate on the RFP is a huge one as well. It's just a cost savings that you all don't have to go out for an RFP, including ours for a more comprehensive vision. And then a joint funding model, I think, is also super exciting in terms of the people that are applying for the cultural funding opportunities are also, some may be outside of the city, they may be in the county and the city, and working both together. It only enhances the aesthetics of Wichita and contributes to the cultural fabric. So I think this does a lot of what we want. It doesn't hurt services. There's nothing in here that I see that's going to eliminate staff or eliminate resources, really just streamline it for residents to be able to use better. And I think we should communicate to the public, so.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I support this in general. I'm just curious about the fiscal note, just kind of what the savings are for you guys, what it does to our side of the street as well as far as funding goes. So I'm just kind of curious with that.
Yeah, I think, and Tom, you might help with this here. I think this is just the original discussion that from a couple of years ago for Becky Tuttle and myself was an actual consolidation of the Parks Department. We've gone from a consolidation of Parks Department to where at one point in time it's like, hey, does the city want our parks in exchange for something else? You know, we'll take something and give you our parks. And this we've arrived at now is it's just a service piece of it. It's just you're doing programming in Sedgwick County Park, Lake Afton. End users can access information about Sedgwick County through one portal. Tom, am I missing that? There isn't a fiscal note in any of this, correct?
This is an efficiency of service. I don't know that there's a huge fiscal savings note on this. It's the first step as we move forward on the conversation of this, but it is an efficiency step right now just to collaborate and work better together.
Yeah.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah.
I would agree. This is a good first step. I think it's just a first step. I think there are some capital needs, some large capital needs at Sedgwick County Park, being the one that uses it a lot. I think maybe later on we can have those discussions, but I think this is a good first step of shared services and programming at Sedgwick County Park, which a lot of people think is a city park. Even though it's called Sedgwick County Park, they think it's a city park. So I think it's a good first step.
Yeah.
Well, we're on the topic of fiscal notes, just so that we all have the same information kind of moving forward. According to our budget, the Parks and Rec Department receives $29.6 million in expenditures. So operations is $941,000. Recreations is $6.5 million. Recreation Ice Rink Fund is $1 million. Parks, $15.1 million. Park Cemetery, $124,800. And golf, $5.86 million. Just so that we all have some sort of information regarding Parks and Rec, $29.6 million.
I'm a terrible golfer, but the county we do about 1.1 million in parks. There's some principles here that I think, and I'm speaking for myself in my seat, but the question always comes down at the county is, what is our core service? What's our core functionality? What is it we do? By and large, I don't know if parks and the operation of Sedgwick County Park and Lake Afton and Northeast Sedgwick County Park, which is just grassland for the most part, is really in the core service of Sedgwick County government, which is why I've always been of the attitude that whatever is not of our core service, let's look to partner, let's look to consolidate, let's look to divest, let's look about us focusing on the things that we do that are our core service. There's another discussion that needs to happen. I'm really looking forward to the discussions that Lindsay's going to initiate, is the funding model of these things. You know, again, speaking for myself, but I know Commissioner Howell and I, we've worked on this frequently together, is we just simply don't believe that property tax dollars should be used for things that are not in our core service. We want to use property tax dollars for public safety, public health, public works, things of that sort. And we've talked a lot about the utilization of our sales tax for our parks, recs, cultural arts discussion, which we have plenty of that in our capacity to do. Not an expert on your budget, but I know that on our end, we talk about what's our core service and what's the funding model. But ultimately, we know of the three things in cultural arts that we do, they're massive in this community. We have the Sedgwick County Zoo, we have Exploration Place, and we have Intrust Bank Arena. They're consequential to this community, to the economic vitality of this community. I mean, these are Sedgwick County assets. And we also know that property tax dollars funding these is not a safe and secure and long-term sustainable strategy. It's not. So right now it's working. right now, it'll suffice, but we need to start planning long-term as to what's a revenue model for what we do that can make these sustainable long into the future, because it impacts the quality of life that people that live here, and I'm just simply not going to sacrifice that. So these are conversations I'm really excited about, Lindsay. I probably picked her brain with a dozen emails and side conversations of what it is that she's working on, what she's doing. I think she's the right person to kind of lead this discussion. I think she's brilliant, and I think she's going to bring some creative strategies for us to consider long-term of how this works. So just a couple of thoughts of mine.
What are the expenditures for your top 3 cultural arts?
Boy, the CFO is right behind my shoulder, and I can feel her, but because this is a test, I'm supposed to know this.
I'll wing it for you, Chairman.
Well, the Sedgwick County Zoo is about $9 million. Exploration Place is more unique, as we simply give about $2.2 million. Oh, our CFO's here. Lindsay, go ahead. About $2 million to Exploration Place, and then
2.1 to EP. Oh, thank you.
there you go. Here she is.
So Lindsay Peruso, I'm the county CFO. So yes, we have about $9.5 million that goes to the Sedgwick County Zoo, the bulk of which is for personnel. We also have just over $2.1 million that goes to Exploration Place. And then the allocation for the arena is only a dollar for dollar match from our general fund for the facility fee that is generated. Otherwise, that continues to be operated out of the Arena Reserve Fund. And so that taps out about $200,000 per year.
Thank you, Master Jedi. The point being in all of this is these are right smack dab in the middle of Wichita, and we've got to protect these assets long-term for the quality of life. So the revenue model that we're going to discuss long into the future is really important. It's an equal part of this discussion. But for the public to know, Councilmember Ballard, this is important, that there's no changes to these cultural arts funding models, agreements, contracts. None of that is changing today. This is discussions about what the long-term longevity of these things look like in the agreements. But none of that is changing today.
I will add just more information to this discussion. According to our 2025 budget, cultural arts gets $6.79 million. Century 2, $4.592 million. I think those are the two because the others are not. But they belong underneath the city manager's office. So cultural arts and Century 2 convention.
Thank you. Yeah, Commissioner.
Thank you, Chairman. Madam Mayor, just if I understand correctly, the one thing that's actually potentially going to change that's been identified and sounds like there's agreement is a streamlined process for renting facilities.
Okay.
Is that it specifically? So my question would be, is there going to be one place to go or going to be 2 places to go to do this? Or can you go to a county office and rent a city building? Or can you go to a city office and rent a county building? Or is there just one office to rent both? What are we talking about exactly?
Brett, any insight?
I can speak a little bit about the capability of the system that we have. We currently have it set up to our rec track system, which is web-based. The community can log in at one single point and register for any facilities that we have in the city that's registered there. So as we extend it to the county, that can be an option for that as well. We do something a little bit different with the library where they go into a single point of contact there, but there's a separate link to go to another site to register for programs there with the library.
So I would hope if you go to the county website, then it just jumps over to the city website. So there's only one place that's managing these assets rather than 2, just to keep things simple.
Mm-hmm.
Once again, consolidation, right? I am concerned a little bit about some of the statements in this document, but before I even get to that, let me read just one paragraph here. This is on Mr. Sorensen's letter. It says that the committee recommends developing a recreation, parks, and cultural arts funding model for external organizations that is comprehensive of funding from the city and the county. The model will reflect community priorities, emphasize performance-based outcomes, and create opportunities to enhance cultural arts in Wichita. It goes on. So one of my questions is, are we talking about adding things that we're not doing currently? Are we talking about fund? Is there going to be to Madam Mayor's comment a minute ago, is there a fiscal impact to doing anything, or are we agreeing to any type of future obligation or intent to do anything with finances in any way?
Yeah, no, the letter was consensus from Blue Ribbon Committee. All that we're agreeing on today is that Lindsay's going to study this issue and report back some recommended strategies and some opportunities based on what she knows and what she does now and what we do. So all we're agreeing to today is saying, Lindsay, you'll do your work and give us a recommendation.
Okay. And I think if we have one place to go to access more facilities and a streamlined, process for the user, that's probably a good thing. I would support that.
Yeah.
With respect to some of the language in the PowerPoint that was presented, there's some things in there that honestly, I'm reading it and I don't have a clue what it's talking about. So, I don't know if I should read those or not, but, if I wanted to say, if we're going to, outside of what we just talked a second ago, I'm not really in agreement with anything else in the PowerPoint at this moment, because there's a lot of questions about what does some of that stuff mean. We would need to have a workshop, and I probably have a dozen questions at least, because it opens up a lot of things, but I'm not necessarily in agreement with any of it at this moment. So I just want to be very clear. Thank you so much.
Yep. Okay, other questions or comments? Okay, Madam Mayor?
I know it's not on the agenda, but I think this is a perfect opportunity. Any further discussion regarding shared services? As we have already mentioned, MABCD, the opioid settlement, and then today we're talking about just streamlining a process, again, so that there's one point of contact to try to reserve these spaces in parks. So really, it's about efficiency. Are there any other ideas that this council or commission have regarding shared services?
Lots of ideas, Mayor. But other thoughts today?
Let's just get a couple wins and then we can go on.
Sure. Commissioner Howe?
Thank you, Chairman, Madam Mayor. As we talk about this topic, once again, there are lots of different ideas of what consolidation means in terms of shared services or functional consolidation or any type of consolidation. Trying to simplify government means that you have one government doing something on behalf of more than one government, if you will. That's the most efficient form of consolidation. First thing I would just point out here is there has been a lot of consolidation in the past.
Mm-hmm.
Don't forget our history. And I would just say, for example, 911, a great example. I'm very proud of our 911, our emergency communications department, but they serve the entire county. It wasn't always that way. And then sometimes there's some dissatisfaction on some cities. They're critical of what we provide. And I think that when they're critical, rather than recreate that, talk to us so we can make improvements and address the concerns. But we should be interested in not recreating something that's currently being handled by one governing body on behalf of other governing bodies. EMS is another one. We're receiving critical comments on our EMS. If there's concerns about that, we need to talk about it so we can address those things. We don't need to recreate. A medical response team is a duplication of services. We don't need a different dispatcher for fire. We need to use the dispatchers we have in place. And so there are so many things we've already consolidated that there has been a lot of efficiencies that have been created because of, the people that were here before us did a really good job of working together and putting these things in place. And we can make them better. And so if we find ourselves dissatisfied with something that's currently consolidated, rather than recreate those things or simply be critical in the public eye, we need to work with each other to address those concerns. And then I would say also that when we do things for this community, this idea of a partnership between city and county, I am concerned about this issue of double taxation, especially in Wichita residents. They're paying county taxes and they're paying city taxes. And so if you're in Wichita and we have a city and county partnership, we're both funding the same thing. In my opinion, that residence is double paying through two different governing bodies. It would be much more efficient and much more streamlined and much more consolidated to let one lead on any initiative. Partnerships are sexy because it sounds really politically really great. But at the end of the day, it's a more complex form of government. When you want to consolidate something, it means you hand over the keys and the revenue stream and the decision authority and the budget to one body for the other body. That's true consolidation. Co-locating is a form of consolidation, and it may be more convenient for our users. but there's not generally any savings involved in co-location. Partnerships, in my opinion, they are unfair to some taxpayers. So if you really want to talk about shared services, at the end of the day, the more we can streamline the form of government, the better. By the way, the lowest hanging fruit on this entire list is fire training. Fire training. You guys you have a beautiful training facility, and we are in the process of creating a fire training facility right now, right down the street. By the way, right between Derby's fire training facility and Wichita's regional fire training center. We're going to create our own. That is not okay with me. We have to work together. It's better for Wichita. It's better for Sedgwick County. It's really better for the taxpayers and the citizens if we can work that out, to not duplicate that form of government.
I agree with you.
You want to talk about something that's really going to impact taxpayers and efficiency in government. That's our lowest hanging fruit. I appreciate this idea today on streamlining how to rent buildings, but I tell you what, the fire training is way more important to me. We should start with that.
Thank you, Commissioner Howell. I will ask City Manager Layton to address that.
Thank you, Mayor. The county manager and I have had some discussions about that, and as I understand it, the offer has been for the county to help expand the training facility so that both jurisdictions could adequately use it, and then also look at what we can do jointly on fire training grounds. I think we have a general agreement on concept. It's just a matter of finalizing something to bring forward to the commission and the council.
That's great.
Did I miss?
One of you two.
Pete, you go first. Okay. I'll just mention, thank you to Harvey and the group that's looking at all the consolidation. And I would, I know you're right behind me, Harvey, but I would encourage, I think there's cases that are factual success stories and a few failure stories around the country on unified governments in general. And I know that some like to point out the failures, but I think the successes around the country are documented. We could have even staff help support you all just in researching why did it succeed? Why did these fail? And as Wichita being the 50th-ish largest city in the country, and we clearly are the largest community in the state, I think a leadership in what we contribute to the state's economy with everything we do just far surpasses all of the other branches of government that are in the state today versus Johnson County. But I just feel it's important to me and for us that we at least look at it and say, hey, what we're doing right here with 20 cities in the county and the county government structure is good, or we look at it and say, hey, there's some options here of success. I don't even think we need to invent anything as much as just look at everything. And I think it's responsible to the citizens that I've talked to that would at least say, hey, here's some information that we should consider. So if you're looking for a mission statement for your group, I just gave you a task. So thanks for letting me say a few words.
Thank you, Commissioner and Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Sorensen, for the committee's work on looking at this. I think it's a start. Also, animal services and animal control. We can have that discussion anytime. I know there's a lot of need there for it. I think you guys have a little bit of room out there, but yes, I would like to have that conversation with you guys.
We'll engage any conversation. There is a need. Now, listen, this is a conversation Manager Stoltz and I had just last week, and I had mentioned it to Mayor and Vice Mayor. I know that there is a lot of discussion around animal control, animal services, the shelter, and we realize that there is a problem in the community. We absolutely understand that. If there's a problem, it deserves leadership and discussion. So, and if there's a better way to do it, because, you know, we have other cities, Park City, Valley Center, Mays, these are other cities that also have the same needs. So let's have the conversation to figure out and identify where the gaps are, and if there's an opportunity for collaboration, I'll be the first in line. So I appreciate that. We appreciate Regional Forensic Science. Manager Layton, thank you for your response. Those are conversations that we are going to invest money into this on the county side, and where we're going to invest money, I think, is the biggest piece of this. And if we can make it better for the entire community, then let's do that jointly. So that conversation needs to happen. I would just say that as the government continues to, the cost of government continues to increase, that our constituents demand us to be creative in our strategies and to evolve where we can. Commissioner Howell is right. There are great examples of consolidation and one government doing it on behalf of other governments. There's great examples of interlocal agreements where we're doing and sharing some of these things. So we know this model does have validity. So if it has validity in some, it could have validity in other areas, and we need to be creative enough and bold enough and curious enough to figure out what those areas are. So, okay, Madam Mayor, anything else on your end?
Sure. I just wanted to say thank you again to the commission and the county staff for coming over to City Hall for this second of 4 en bancs. The next 2 en bancs will be held on July 29th and on October 29th. And again, we're happy to host over here. But one final thing, and it really closes out the conversation about shared services. I appreciate that we're having these conversations. And as you can see, this is the first time we've had 4 scheduled en bancs with these 2 entities, city and county. A lot of individuals in our community sometimes believe what your services are the ones that are provided by the city of Wichita, or vice versa. We also get a lot of questions and concerns regarding schools, and we have nothing to do with schools. So because of all these questions from community, not understanding that we are separate entities, Sedgwick County Commission, City Council, and USD 259 School Board elected are all different elected bodies. I wanted to create the very first town hall that will bring together Sedgwick County Chairman, as well as the president of USD 259, as well as myself, to a town hall, a listening session from our community. That will be held this upcoming June 4th, which is a Wednesday, at 5 o'clock right here at City Hall. And one of the topics of conversation after just listening to community through that town hall is actually hearing from community about what are some shared services they believe we should have between the 3 of us. And I appreciate Commissioner Howell in saying co-locating spaces or even sharing spaces is one opportunity. I've said it multiple times. The city council chambers are utilized only 1 day a week, Tuesdays at 9 a.m. It is vacant 6 days out of the week. There's no need for Sedgwick County to create a new auditorium for your commission meetings. And I know that I've invited USD 259 in the past to come and just give an update from USD 259's perspective, and they've liked being in the council chambers and have asked previously, can they maybe do a couple of meetings here? And I think those are ways to really help serve the community better. And that is, there is a space that already has the equipment, that has the capabilities of having an open meeting. So why not utilize those spaces and collaborate more? So I appreciate that you guys come over, and I'm looking forward to the June 4th town hall. More information will be forthcoming, but it will be an opportunity for Chairman Beatty as well as President Diane Albert to listen to our community, and then let's have a conversation about shared services.
That's great. Okay, anything else on our side? Okay, we're good. Madam Mayor, you want to break us down?
Again, thank you very much. We will adjourn our side of the meeting, so we will let you guys.
We stand adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.